I was bleeding onto concrete behind a grocery store holding my twin babies with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, while a woman in a cheap hoodie stared at me like I was either her worst mistake or her only chance. And when she said, "Sir, I'm calling 911, I grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Please don't," because I knew if anyone official showed up, my life wouldn't just end, it would be erased. Yeah, that was the moment everything turned. My name back then was Evan Cole. At least, that's the name on my ID, and no one looking at me that night would have guessed I was the founder of a cybersecurity company worth billions. They saw a bleeding man cornered, desperate, clinging to two crying babies like a shield. And honestly, that's exactly how I felt. Let me rewind a bit, because this didn't start in that alley. It started years earlier with people deciding who I was before I ever opened my mouth. I grew up in a small manufacturing town, the kind where if you weren't loud or athletic or connected, you were invisible. I was the quiet kid, skinny, always reading, always building things out of broken electronics, and people loved to remind me I didn't belong. Teachers underestimated me. Classmates mocked me. Even adults smiled politely like my dreams were cute but unrealistic. I learned early that being underestimated hurts, but it also teaches you how to watch, how to plan, how to wait. I left town the first chance I got, built my company from nothing, slept on office floors, fought investors who laughed in my face. And when it finally worked, when the contracts came in and the money followed, people suddenly decided I was brilliant, like I hadn't been the same person all along. But success doesn't make you untouchable. Sometimes it paints a bigger target. The night everything went wrong, I was already on edge. My wife Mara had died during childbirth months earlier. Complications no one could have predicted, and I'd been moving through life like a machine ever since, focused only on protecting our twins, Noah and Eli. My company had developed encryption software that governments wanted, corporations wanted, and some people wanted without paying or asking. I said no. That was my mistake or my line in the sand, depending on how you look at it. They came for me at my office first, masked, efficient, not shouting, not dramatic. I fought my way out, grabbed the twins from the daycare downstairs and ran. I knew hospitals were watched. Police systems were compromised. I knew too much to trust the obvious options. So I ran until my body gave out behind that grocery store, and that's where she found me. Her name was Lena Parker. She worked nights at a laundromat nearby, barely scraping by, dealing with customers who treated her like furniture. I could see it in her eyes when she looked at me, that calculation people make when they decide whether you're worth the trouble. When I told her not to call for help, she hesitated, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is where my story ends, judged by someone who doesn't know me and has no reason to care. But she didn't walk away. She got us into her car. Old Loud smelled like detergent, and Coffee talked the entire drive like she was afraid silence would kill me. She told me about her life, about being dropped out of college to support a sick brother, about people assuming she was dumb because of where she worked. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Two people misjudged their whole lives, bleeding together in the dark. Her apartment was tiny, cluttered, safe. She cleaned my wound with hands that shook but didn't stop, fed my sons with formula she somehow had, and sat on the floor watching all three of us like she was guarding something precious. I passed out more than once. When I woke up, she was still there. The next morning, when I was conscious enough to talk, she demanded the truth. Not politely, not gently. She said, I didn't risk prison for you to lie to me. I told her everything. Who I was, what I'd built, why people wanted me gone. I expected her to panic, to kick me out, to call the police anyway. Instead, she laughed. A short, bitter laugh. So, all this time, she said, people thought you were nothing, too. We stayed hidden for days. I healed slowly. She went to work like nothing was wrong, came home exhausted, still helped with the twins, still asked sharp questions about my plans. She didn't let me romanticize danger. When I said I'd handle it, she snapped back, you almost died handling it. No one talked to me like that anymore. No one challenged me. And weirdly, I needed it. The confrontation came on the 5th night. One of the men found us. I woke up to a sound at the door, quiet but wrong. Lena was already there holding a bat, eyes focused, fearless in a way that made my chest tighten. When the door cracked open and the man stepped inside, confident smiling like he owned the place, she didn't scream. She said, "You're in the wrong apartment." He laughed. I stood up behind him and said, "No, he's exactly where he meant to be." It wasn't clean. It wasn't heroic. It was fast, desperate, loud. But when it was over, and the police finally arrived on my terms with evidence I'd been collecting with systems locked down and allies activated, everything shifted. The truth came out. Arrests were made. The story hit, the news twisted and simplified, painting me as a victim or a genius depending on the outlet. But Lena disappeared from the headlines. No one asked why a woman like her would take a risk like that. No one asked what it cost her. I made sure she didn't stay invisible. I helped her finish school. I helped her brother get treatment. Not as charity, not as a savior, but as someone repaying a debt that can't really be repaid. She didn't suddenly become rich or famous. She became free, and she earned every inch of it. Years later, when people ask me about success, about power, about winning, I don't talk about money or deals. I talk about a night behind a grocery store, about being bleeding and afraid and underestimated, and about a woman everyone overlooked who decided to step in anyway. Because the truth is, victory doesn't always look like domination. Sometimes it looks like survival, like dignity, like refusing to let the world decide your worth. So here's my question for you, and I really want you to think about it before you answer in the comments. When you see someone at their lowest, someone the world has already judged, do you assume they deserve to be there, or do you stop long enough to ask what story you're not seeing? And if you were Lena standing in that alley, would you have walked away? Or would you have taken the risk that changes everything?